children and 5 grandchildren. Janet taught in Tulsa Public Schools from 1992 to 2016. Her subject is U.S. history. Janet taught at Carver Middle School from 1992 to 2005, when she was chosen as Tulsa's Teacher of the Year. She served a year as TPS ambassador for teaching for a year, and then taught at Booker T. Washington High School from 2007 to 2016. Janet says that she loved her job and it never felt like work. Please welcome Janet Thomas.
Thank you, Marion. First of all, I want to let you all know that this will be a little bit history and a little bit travel. As a history teacher, it's difficult for me to do anything without causing it to be somewhat history related. In the fall semester of 2012, my student Seamus Ryan Johnson and I were chosen to participate in the Normandy Institute. We had filled out 9 different pieces of information and sent it in and waited anxiously for 2 months to find out that we had been chosen. We were part of 14 teacher-student teams. Each person, when they agreed to accept this nomination, agreed to spend about 10 hours a week in the spring semester in study, reading, reflecting, and researching. All of the students were charged with selecting a soldier from their home state that's buried in the cemetery in Normandy, and preparing a web page and a eulogy in that soldier's honor. The Tulsa World did an article on us published on January 13th, 2013. And following that publication, I received a phone call from Charlotte Hardgrave asking if Seamus could choose her brother, William Dormeyer, who is buried in Normandy. She'd been contacted by members of the Legion of Flowers. The Legion of Flowers is a group of people who decorate the graves of soldiers that are buried there that are not from France. And Seamus had to ask permission, but he received permission to choose William as his soldier. So we were all set. We received a huge box of books in January and spent the spring reading and blogging with other members of the Institute. On June 15th, we flew to Washington, D.C. for a week of lectures, memorials, special events, and World War II movies. Albert Small, this is a picture of Albert Small. He's a philanthropist that funded this entire venture. It did not cost Seamus and I a penny to do this. He welcomed us, and his idea for this was he really wanted to pass down to the younger generation the sacrifice that was made by these young soldiers as they embarked upon this quest in Normandy. His original idea was to just load a bunch of high school students onto a 747 and take them to France. History Day got a hold of it and assured him that that probably was not going to be the best way for these young people to understand the sacrifice, and came up with a program that he then endorsed and supported. We were able to be in DC for a week, and we participated in a wreath laying at the World War II Memorial. We were guests at the French Embassy. This is a French ambassador in Washington, D.C. And on the day that we were there, it was the day that they recognize and give awards to people who are not French citizens that have done the most for their country. And it also commemorates the day that Charles de Gaulle was allowed to get on the BBC. Winston Churchill gave him permission right after the fall of France in 1940, and urged the French people not to give up, to resist the Nazi occupation. We also did research at the National Archives, which was amazing to be able to be allowed in there and see some of the documents that they have. One activity that the students participated in, and I do not have a picture of this, was they were given yearbooks. They were divided into 5 groups, and they were given yearbooks from 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, and 45. They were to ask themselves questions while they looked at these yearbooks. What in this yearbook is like mine, yearbook that I have? What is different than mine? And what evidence of the war do I see? Well, the early yearbooks had things like rubber drives and scrap metal drives and things like that. The group that I was observing was from 1945, and they opened it up, and the first 2 pages were Gold Star students that had left high school early and had already been killed in the war. This really brought it home to the kids what age these students were, these soldiers were that went over there. After this intense week of preparation, we flew to France. Planning started May of 1943. Eisenhower was selected to be in charge. He was a good person for the job because there were lots of egos that needed to be satisfied. They had de Gaulle from France, and then Churchill and Montgomery from Great Britain, and Patton too. There were logistical issues that no army had ever had to cope with. And besides the actual landing, the Allies planned to have a huge amount of men and equipment landed by the end of the day. Eisenhower was level-headed, had the right temperament for the job. It was a massive, complex, uncertain, multinational operation, and it was the most well-planned event in history. Security was crucial. Surprise and deception were essential to tricking the Germans into thinking the invasion was coming somewhere else. Normandy was selected because the beaches were suitable for a mass landing of people and equipment. And it was also essential to gather this huge amount of equipment by the end of the day without attracting the attention of the Germans, that they were going to move. Normandy has about 6 miles of beaches. So this was the planning that went on. And they even created a dummy unit that they put Patton in charge of. The Germans thought Patton was the greatest American general. And they also thought that the invasion was going to come at Calais. So Patton was in charge of this fake unit across the channel from Calais. If you get a chance sometime, look at some of the pictures from this, because from the aerial reconnaissance the Germans did, there were tanks, there were things, but the tanks were balloons. You can see pictures from the American standpoint and the British standpoint of people meeting on 4 corners of the tank and picking it up and moving it somewhere else, just to fool the Germans and make them think that that is where the invasion was coming. So some of the things that went into the planning were there were going to be 5 assault divisions. They needed over 6,000 ships. They wanted to land 156,000 troops on the beaches that day. There were 11,590 Allied aircraft. They dropped 10,395 tons of bombs on June 6th. There were 9,500 Allied attack and support aircraft. And the night before the invasion, the night of the 5th to the 6th, they dropped 7,616 tons of bombs on Normandy. There were 200 warships that participated in the bombardment of the beaches out in the ocean or out in the channel as they were deploying the troops to the beach. And the thing that was remarkable is there was only 10,500, which is still a lot, but they expected the casualties to be much, much greater by the end of the day. So 10,500 casualties by the end of the day. The Germans had been occupying France since 1940. They built an extensive system of coastal fortifications. This is one of them right here. By 1944, to defend the territory that they had conquered. There were reinforced concrete pillboxes along the beaches with machine guns, anti-tank guns, and light artillery. Mines and anti-tank obstacles were planted on the beaches themselves. Underwater mines were placed in the waters just offshore to destroy enemy landing craft before they reached the beaches. On D-Day, there were 4.5 million mines in the Normandy area. This is the Grand Bunker. This is on Sword Beach. And the interior of it, you entered it from underground, and the interior of it was very well laid out. And this is a mock-up of it that was an example, so you could see all the different floors and the things that were going on inside the bunker. And when you got to the very top, you could see out. This is the back piece of this diorama is that Grand Bunker. And this is an example of some of the things that were in the water on the day that Normandy invasion happened. Besides the mines, there were these obstacles that if a ship ran up on them, here's one, these are concrete with steel teeth on the side of it, so it would rip the bottom of the ship or the boat open. This is one of the pillboxes that covers the coast of Normandy. These were concrete. They had these guns in them. The guns had a 15-mile, 180-degree radius. So they could rotate in a half circle. And basically they put these pillboxes about every 30 miles along the beach so they could cover the whole beach from one end of France all the way to the other end of France. The entrances were down below, and it protected them from up above. The night before the invasion was to take place, Eisenhower said to the troops, "Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the Great Crusade, toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hope and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. I have full confidence in your courage and devotion to duty and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. But in the meantime, because really nothing was sure, he is carrying this message in his pocket. Our landings in the Cherbourg Harbor area have failed to gain satisfactory foothold, and my decision to attack at this time and place was based on the best information available. The troops, Air Force, and Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do, and if any blame or fault attaches to the attempts, it is mine alone." At the end of the day, they had landed 156,000 men on the beach, and the casualties by midnight, June 6th, were 10,500. One of the first aspects of Operation Overlord, which is what it was called for paratroopers and glider troops to land overnight to secure the inland bridges and exit roads, because it was going to be important for the soldiers to be able to move inland. They didn't just want the beaches, they needed to move inland in order to get to Germany. And this is a picture from the Pegasus Bridge. The Pegasus Bridge was an essential bridge that without access to it, the troops were not going to be able to enter. and it is on Sword Beach, and it was attacked by 3 gliders. And gliders were released in the air. They landed at night in the dark. I am standing where the first glider landed when I took this picture. The second one is where the second marker is, and the third one was right behind that. I then turned around and took this picture. That's where the bridge was. I do not understand how they were able to get that close in the dark, and they were able to secure the bridge. And that little restaurant on the left side of the bridge in this picture was the first place liberated by the British soldiers on D-Day, early in the morning. It's a little restaurant, still a restaurant today. It was the first place we ate after flying all night and then getting in a bus and driving from Paris to the Pegasus Bridge. Had a great French baguette ham sandwich, and it was wonderful. The other thing that was important, this is another picture of the Pegasus Bridge and the inside of the glider. These gliders, they had no engines. They were just released and had to steer to where they were supposed to land. They also dropped paratroopers back behind the lines. This is overnight. And this is a picture of one of the dummies that was also dropped along with the paratroopers that were there to help the troops get inland after the beach landings. This is a church in St. Marie-Glace, and this is a dummy today, but on the morning of June 6th, it was a real person. He lived and got caught up on the steeple of the church, was able to watch from there, pretending to be dead, what was going on down below him. The Airborne Museum is at St. Marie-Glace, and it recognizes and honors the American airmen that came that day. In that church, there is this absolutely gorgeous stained glass window that commemorates those troopers that came, and it was given and built in honor of the 25th anniversary of the liberation. And you can see, you can see the paratroopers as they're coming down in the stained glass. And this bronze statue is at the museum. It says the day they came. You can see the hands reaching up, the chains coming off, and the American flag with a paratrooper parachute up above it. This is Lafayette. Lafayette had a bridge that was very important and a road across that bridge that would take them inland. The Germans had flooded these fields, which was going to make, if the bridge was not taken by the Americans, it was going to make the soldiers be basically sitting ducks, because the Germans were on the other side and the fields were all flooded. The Americans came, they secured the bridge, and that was hugely important. The beach landings took place in Higgins boats were what brought them. This is a Higgins boat, and if you can imagine it being filled with soldiers with their packs, and then the end came down, and the gentleman who invented the Higgins boat was from New Orleans, which is why the National World War II Museum is in New Orleans. Here's a picture of the beaches and the 5 different beach heads. Utah and Omaha were the Americans. Gold and Sword were British, and Juneau was Canadian. Those were the troops that landed on each one of those. And visiting these beaches was just amazing. The 5 beaches had 2 artificial harbors because they were shallow. Normandy was chosen because it had a 60-mile shallow beach, which meant that they were not going to be able to land heavy equipment. And they came up with this idea to put these two artificial harbors, codenamed Mulberry A and Mulberry B. Mulberry A was on Omaha Beach. Mulberry B was on Gold Beach. And it was Omaha Beach. There was a huge storm on the 21st of June, and the Mulberry at Omaha Beach was destroyed. But the one at Gold Beach was in use for 10 months. And I'm going to enlarge this a little bit so you can see it. Basically, what they did was they sank ships to create a breakwater out in the channel, and then they built a dock and had roads 6 miles inland from where they were able to unload equipment and supplies from. This is the remnants of Mulberry B that you can still see today. We were there, the tide was coming in, so we weren't able to see as much of them as we expected to be able to see. But you can still see the evidence of it today. When we visited, the two specific beaches we visited were Utah Beach and Omaha Beach. And when you visit those beaches, you can hardly imagine today the chaos that reigned on June 6th, 1944. They're beaches. And we were warned that we should not be offended by if we saw people swimming or playing or walking their dogs, just enjoying themselves, because that was what we were fighting for, the freedom to live and enjoy life as we pleased. Teddy Roosevelt Jr. landed on Utah Beach. He was Teddy Roosevelt's oldest son, and he was 56 years old. He is the only general that landed on the beach on D-Day. He wanted to go with his men. He finally got permission. And when he realized that they had been blown off course, he said, well, then we'll start the war from right here. And so they did. He was the oldest general. And this restaurant there on Utah Beach is named the Roosevelt Restaurant after him. When you go inside, and I couldn't take pictures inside, when you go inside, there are signatures of many of the soldiers that landed on Utah Beach that day. And just as an aside, he had arthritis. Teddy Roosevelt Jr. had fought in World War I, had arthritis from those wounds. He had heart problems that he didn't tell his commanding officer about. And he died of a heart attack in July of 44 and is buried at the Omaha Beach Cemetery. We went to Omaha Beach. This is where the most difficult fighting went on. And you can see that it would have been very difficult to get off in a flat beach and be approaching those cliffs and try to make headway up as the Germans were shooting at you. There's a picture of the beach itself. Those are my footprints on the beach. And I just want you to think about the fact that I was not carrying any weight, just had a little backpack. The soldiers that were there that morning, they were soggy and wet from landing in the water. They had packs that weighed between 50 and 100 pounds. They're dodging bullets. What a difficult time it must have been. Can't even imagine. We moved inland from the beaches, and our trip basically was planned around the students' soldiers. We didn't really know that at first, but each student was given an assignment to do a briefing at one of the places we stopped. This is Seamus doing his briefing, and it is near Hill 192, which is where William, our soldier, was killed. And each student was an expert on the area where their soldier was killed. One of the coolest things that happened was this young woman here in front with the blonde hair. Her soldier, as she was doing her research about him to make the web page and all that, he was a medic and he died in Pierre's. And when she was doing her research, she discovered that there was a statue of him there. And we went to see it. And I don't think there was a dry eye in the group when she walked up to the statue. This is him on the right, and reached out and took his hand. It was so moving. As we moved on inland, we went to the Bocage country. That is an area where they have hedgerows. Hedgerows are earthen fences between farming land. They've been built up over years and generations. And the top of this hedgerow is right above her head. This was not something they anticipated, so it took much longer to fight out of the Normandy area than the Allies had anticipated, because this is perfect defensive fortifications. The Germans were able to dig in behind and could see through the brush and be protected, but could attack as the Allies came through that area. That tree, I'm standing there, and that tree is at my eye level, the roots of it are. And here we are walking on down next to a hedgerow. It was just ideal for defensive fighting. And they had had 4 years to perfect that camouflage. There are many, many cemeteries in Normandy, and we visited, obviously, the American one the last day, but this is a German cemetery and a British cemetery. We visited them on the same day, and they're both places for quiet reflection, but the German cemetery was quite dark. The grave markers were iron crosses, and it was very kind of an austere place. The British cemetery, on the other hand, had rows and rows of flowers around every grave. And one of the teachers said that she had read somewhere that when a British soldier is buried in a foreign country, that the shadow of a rose should be on his grave at some point during the day. And as you look at these pictures, you can see there are rose bushes scattered throughout the cemetery. And the families were allowed to plant certain kinds of flowers that they wanted to also near their loved ones' graves. Definitely different look. On our final day in Normandy, we started at Omaha Beach. This is the 1st Infantry Division monument. And then we walked down to the beach, and then we walked up to the cemetery, climbing up the cliff where our brave soldiers had climbed 69 years ago. The cemetery was a culmination of 6 months of work and study. There we are, going down to the beach. And going up. It was not an easy walk up to the cemetery where we went to the top of the hill. Our visit started with an official wreath laying ceremony. And then Seamus and I met Vincent and his family. Vincent was one of the men who'd been laying flowers on William's grave for over 40 years. The Normandy people are very grateful for what was done for them. And we thanked him for coming. He said, "Oh no, thank you." Then we worked our way around the cemetery with each student eulogizing their soldier's life. The students' words gave life to these long dead young men, most of whom have no living descendants. The words and the web pages we created are the physical embodiment of the legacy they gave us all, the freedom we now enjoy today. So as we walked around the cemetery, each student did the following, and this is Seamus's. He was given a bucket of sand, and you put the sand, you rub it into the grave so that the name will stand out because of the honor that's being given that day. Then the students would stand behind, they would put an American flag and a French flag, which they'd been given, down in front, and then they would stand behind and read the eulogy. And I will read the eulogy that Seamus wrote. At the tip of the spear that drove into Nazi Germany, Private William Dormeyer was a unique individual who embodies the spirit of the greatest generation. A country boy, he grew up during the hard years of the Depression, toughened by the Dust Bowl. He, like many of our boys, came of age in the 1930s and 40s and sacrificed themselves by fighting the Axis forces in a terrible war. They were not men, they were simply boys, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds who had only recently left high school. Months earlier, they were preoccupied by homework and girls. June, July 1944 in northern France, these boys became men as they confronted a lethal hindrance. William was a kind person. With bullets flying over his foxhole, he wrote letters home, expressing concern for his family and the farm. William was also a courageous soldier who made the ultimate sacrifice for his fellow soldiers and for the greater Allied cause. He was in the 23rd Regiment of the 2nd Infantry, known as the Indian Head Division. On 10th July 1944, late in the night, Allied command ordered the 23rd Regiment, together with the 9th and the 38th, to begin an assault on Hill 192, nearly 40 miles from Omaha Beach. The Germans were dug in, but the boys fought valiantly, eventually pushing the enemy off the hill. William was one of the many casualties resulting from the attack. The freedom we've grown accustomed to is not untouched or clean. It is an entity earned through individual sacrifice and unfortunate necessary violence. The group of individuals who bore this sacred duty nearly 75 years ago were young, yet mature. They were inexperienced in life, yet confident and proud. Upon rational consideration, they seemed the most illogical choice to face such a daunting foe. Even so, they accomplished their collective goal. They were victorious over evil. Thank you, William. I will not forget you for my entire life. We respect you for your sacrifice and your courage. We respect your generation also for all of the soldiers and the people who died for the valiant defense of freedom. After reading his eulogy, he would come around to the front, have a moment of quiet reflection. He had written a letter that he put there at William's grave that was to William. And Dr. Long, who was our teacher, would, after a few moments of reflection, Dr. Long would pick up the French flag and the American flag. He would roll them up in his hands, and then he would step in and talk quietly to the student about the nature of sacrifice and what he hoped they would remember. Vincent had followed us around and continued to take pictures, not just of Seamus, but of all the students in our group. And this is Dr. Long. One of his students had his college students, and I had to tell this story just because it's such a cool story. One of his college students had done some research on a soldier and had found out that soldier actually had a living descendant, a child, who is now 68, or was in 2013. He went to visit her, and what he found out was that she did not know that the man that raised her was not her biological father. That she found it out after her mother died, and she found all the letters from her father. And she asked if she could write the eulogy for her dad. And Dr. Long was able to read that eulogy that she had written for her father. After everyone had completed their eulogies, we were able to go back to say goodbye to William. And it was just the trip of a lifetime. I knew for a fact that Albert Small's vision had been realized in September. I got home from work one day and was looking at Facebook, and one of the students had posted. And what she had said was, "Today is a very important day in history." And then she went on to give a tribute to her soldier and his sacrifice for freedom. So there's no doubt in my mind that they will remember. And I think it's a vision that was able to be realized. Oh. Anyway, thank you for listening. And I'm going to shut my pictures off now. No, I'm not going to leave the webinar. I don't think I can do that. Let me see. There, stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you so much, Janet. That was wonderful.
Thanks.
So far, we don't have any questions in the chat room. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them. I thought this was a wonderful presentation. It just gives me goosebumps.
Well, I will add something, since it's not officially part of my program and there's no questions. When I went on the board, on the Friends Library board recently, and went on this committee, we were introducing ourselves, and I mentioned about this Normandy trip, which is how come I ended up here. But when I'm telling it, the chair of the committee is Marion, the woman who introduced me. And Charlotte, William's sister, ended up going to France so that she could meet Vincent and Jean with the Tulsa Global Alliance after we came back and gave her the report on it and showed her all the pictures. And Marion was Charlotte's roommate. So I thought that was such a serendipitous thing. Okay, questions?
Let me say one thing real quickly. Being Charlotte's roommate on that trip was amazing. The family came and got her and took her to Normandy, where she was treated like a member of the family. And it was just an amazing experience for her. And when she came back, she, had just been there. And so I was really privileged to be able to be the first person, one of the first people to hear about her amazing experience and being able to visit the grave of her brother. And she was able to put the sand in his name on the stone too. And it was just a really, really special day. Charlotte did not know her brother because she was born after he died, but she'd always known about him, and it was special. Let me see. Okay, one question was, does this program continue today?
Yes, it does. As a matter of fact, I just talked to one of the people that helps manage it, and they've gone to some other places too. They've gone to several of the memorials of battles from World War I. They've also gone to Korea and are now working on moving to the Pacific to be able to share it. And there is a website where you can access, not Seamus's, because when we were in one of the first groups that went. And so the student websites were sort of temporary websites that they did for History Day type programs. They're working on converting them to this new, more permanent website. And that's what I was talking to Lynn about yesterday. But if you want to see more of these, more of the things about the students or about the eulogies, it's in National History Day, NHDSilentHeroes.org. And they've got World War II memorials. They've got some World War I, some Korea, all there. And they kind of go through and they talk about their soldier, how they grew up. We were so fortunate to have Charlotte because Seamus was able to get letters he'd written home and postcards and all that kind of stuff. So when I talked to Lynn yesterday, she was wanting my help in documenting some of his resources so that they can put it on this newer website. So.
Okay, I was just going to try to type it in, but
Tara did, yeah.
Tara, yes, wonderful. How many days were you there?
We were there 6 days. We ended the last night we were in Paris because we had to fly out really early the next morning. And I couldn't put this picture in but it was one of the funniest things was our cute little bus driver, who was a soccer player, and all the girls thought he was really cute, and he did not speak English. And the only person on the bus that spoke French was Seamus, my student, because he went through Tulsa Public Schools French immersion program. And so Seamus was the only one that could communicate with him. And when we got into Paris, he turned down a street, and it was a very narrow street. So he yells for Seamus, and Seamus goes up there, and Seamus says we need to go move a car. So all the guys got off the bus and picked this car up and moved over to the sideway so we could get off. So yeah, it was, I have pictures because I'm like leaning out the window trying to take a picture, but it was funny. So anyway, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Do you happen to know what has happened to your student in the last 8 years?
Yes, I do. He graduated from Booker T. He was, it was the summer before his junior year. So for 2 more years after that, he was at Booker T. And then he graduated from Johns Hopkins. And now he is in graduate school at George Washington University in Georgetown. So he has gone on to pursue international studies, which is one of the things he really wanted to do in order to use his French. And he has been in the ROTC program and participates still in that. So anyway, yeah, I do. I still keep in touch with his parents. He's been very busy, but I still keep in touch with his mom and dad.
That's fantastic. So we did have a response about your story with the car. That's hilarious. I love that story. She says, Heidi.
It really was hilarious.
It's a good thing it was a small French car. You know, they have a lot smaller cars than we do.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. But it's, I mean, it was just so funny.
Oh, that's wonderful. And one of people asked if it's being recorded, and yes, and Tara did respond that they will be posted on the library's YouTube page. I think yes, what it says. Anybody else have any questions? This is wonderful, Janet. I really thank you.
Well,
and I hope that all of you will be able to learn more about it, and will join us again next week when we will present Reverend Marlon Lavenhar will be our traveler next week. I look forward to seeing all of you, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Marion.
Bye-bye.
Bye.